to this our second CYP meeting. And it's nice to see you all here. And I hope I remember that you're actually virtual and not send you home after the meeting, because I still can't remember where anybody is. Right, so we're going to start off with apologies, which I think we've got already. And as far as I know, yeah. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Anyone? No. Minutes of the previous meeting. We were going to have that up on the screen, but I don't know if we have it or not. Oh, yes, Stella is doing it. There we are. It's very small, but I thought it might be easier to follow. So if we could go through page by page, please, and see if anyone has anything to add or take away from it. Can you see it, or do you have your own papers? It's very fine.
Excuse me, I am Mansoor Ahmed. I just need to point out that on 30th September, the meeting which held on 30th September, I was present on that meeting.
Okay, but that comes up in a little while.
Yeah, my name is missing. If you kindly add, please.
Okay, okay, we've taken note of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next page, please. Any issues? No. Okay. So can we go to the next one? Right, okay. Right, and if we can move up, please. Okay, so that's it. Anyone has any issues with it apart from Mansour? No? Could we please add his name to the minutes, please? Thank you.
Will do, Chair.
Thank you.
Right now, so we are going to start with the Director of Corporate Services, Caroline Holland, because I presume you might want to go soon. But anyway, and I apologize again that we've missed your name off. That was sheer accident. Thank you. So we're going to be looking at the business plan, and I think everybody have their paper, hopefully. So Caroline, please. Okay. Caroline? I don't think you can hear me. Caroline? No. Yes.
Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
Sorry, apologies. Thank you, Chair. So the business plan is attached as the sort of last item for hard copy for you to have a look at. And what I thought I'd do is just give you a quick update on where we are, and then give the time at the end for you to ask some questions of me. So clearly, if this is a very challenging and difficult year financially, as well as I think in particular for our service users and our residents. So what we have done and started off, at the gap that we had at which we took to council in March, which was from 3.3 million next year, rising to 11.2 million in 24-25. So what we do, we go through some of the main assumptions and look and see and update those. So we actually looked at pay inflation. So whilst we've had a 2.75% pay award this year, we think going forward, in light of pay restraint and just the way that the economy is, it's likely to be lower levels of pay than we had currently allowed for. So we've reduced the estimates of pay rises from 2% down to 1.5%. So that has released some additional money for us. Inflation, there hasn't been much change to inflation. It's still staying quite low. So we've kept the allowance that we've built into the budget the same, but we've just updated for the budgets which it would be assigned to. So there's some minor changes there. And in light of the fact that the inflation is low, we've reduced the overall excess inflation provision down as well by 200,000 as set out on page 9. Or 11, I think, on this one. It's quite, sorry, the numbers have been overwritten. We've had some challenges with regards to, we were meant to have the spending review and we thought it would be a 3-year one. It's been recently announced that it will only be a 1-year review. So we'll find out on the 25th of November what the outcome for the government department is, but we won't find out the actual settlement then until the middle to late December. So that makes it quite difficult for us to be able to plan and budget appropriately for what we do need to do. The fair funding review has been deferred, so that looks at how monies for each of the authorities is distributed within the overall total. So that's been deferred again. So there are some concerns, but we thought that London would lose quite significantly. So we've got a little bit of relief, we think, until that does come in again. Clearly, the business rates reset and retention scheme have been deferred as well. And I think there is a big question now over whether business rates is a suitable form of funding for local authorities. Clearly, there were various grants that we got, but we don't know yet at this stage if they will continue. But what we have assumed in the budget so far is a 2% increase in council tax and no adult social care preset. Again, there's been no announcement yet around if we can do a higher level of council tax or if we can do a preset, but we'll wait and see what that does mean for us. We've had a look at council tax collection and the collection fund. So this is something that we do every year, and there's an element which is bringing forward the balance from 1819 to distribute, which is then separate from the shortfalls that had during the course of this year. We decided, because times were difficult and monies were tight, that we wouldn't review the capital programme and have a bidding round for that. Any new schemes we said would be funded from SIL if it was appropriate for them to be funded so. And we've been taken increases to the programme funded through SIL to September, October and November Cabinet. So indeed, the monitoring report for November, which is month 6, has already been published for Cabinet on Monday, and you will see some further allocations and additions to the capital programme there. So what we have done then is seen what the gap is from reviewing the normal assumptions, and that is set out in para 211.2 on page 25 of the report. And then we looked at, well, clearly COVID has had a significant impact on our budget. There are various things that we need to factor in. So clearly our income on an ongoing basis, so our parking income, our court fee income, our leisure centres and various other sources of income has clearly been threatened. So we took various assumptions around the levels of income that would be continued going forward. We also looked at the level of savings that we were currently achieving, and we are struggling in some areas to achieve the savings, either because staff have been diverted elsewhere or because the savings are not appropriate to implement at this stage because of the response to COVID that we are dealing with. We've also allowed for some levels of growth because there are some areas where we do need to provide additional monies to service areas, and there's a range of scenarios we've set out there. And then clearly an area which is of interest to this particular panel is the dedicated schools grant and the deficit that we have there. We are currently looking to revise our 5-year deficit, and we'll be reporting that back at a later stage. When we pulled all those scenarios together, there is a table then on page 26 which sets out what those 3 levels of assumptions within each of those 4 areas come together. Normally, I say to you, I like to plan for the worst and then hope for the best. But even I, looking at a gap of 53.3 million next year, struggled with that. So what we said, there will be some, and in some ways we know whatever numbers we have here will be wrong. So I can get that out now in front of you. But what we've said, work towards these, and we'll actually work on the even level. Because there will be some upsides and there will be some downsides. So we set savings targets for each of the departments based on that level of savings. So that looking at the 16.7 million rising to 19.6 by 24-25. And we've asked departments to go away and come back with proposals. We are looking to bring some proposals to Cabinet on Monday. And we'll sort of explain what we're doing there. So we will have the opportunity to bring something then to the Commission on Wednesday. But because there was nothing which went to October Cabinet, because everything is so late, we won't be able to have a further update on the size and scale of the settlement until after the December Cabinet. So we're working through the timings to enable you to be able to consider the proposals. But certainly anything that we publish or Cabinet on Monday night will still pull together in a pack for you before Christmas. So you'll still, whilst the opportunities for shopping with the lockdown, you will still get a present and a pack of papers from us. I would say all of this was done before the announcements of the second lockdown. So certainly some of the income assumptions that have been made in the monitoring report, which would be then feeding in through to the latest assumptions, clearly we're all ahead of that lockdown. So there will be some further changes as we go through. So that's part of the challenge that we have. It's such a moving feast at this stage. So what we don't want to do is sort of bring forward areas where we may not have to do certain things. But I think that's probably enough from me at this stage, but happy to take any questions, Chair.
Does anyone want to answer any questions? Thanks, Caroline. Any questions from anyone? Yes, okay. So that's hailing. Anybody else? Because I'd rather have 3 at a time if possible. No, nobody else wants to ask anything? Okay, and Councillor Holmes.
Thank you.
So I will call you when she finishes, okay? Thanks. Okay, Hayley, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. If I actually concentrate on this year, so within the monitoring for 2020-21 table in 2.10.2, you've actually helpfully broken out the non-COVID. You would be an outturn saving of just short of 4 million this year if it wasn't for COVID, from what I'm reading into that. Then you've got the cost of COVID and then the total variance at the end of this year. I don't actually see within there the government funding that the council's already received, which I understand is short of £15 million to date. So I was wondering whether or not you could actually comment on that at all. And also, in addition to the nearly £15 million, I don't think you've included the money that I understand that you're actually applying for now, or mentioned that within the narrative for the Robert Jenrick 75p in the pound that that the council will be receiving from the government from COVID too. And then my third question is in regard to in terms of the CSF £2 million outturn with non-COVID saving for this year. Would that have been £3 million if the area had actually managed to actually make the cost savings which were forecast for this year in last year's budget?
Thank you. Okay, if we could go to the next person. Councillor Holmes, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, Chair. So, Caroline, thanks very much for your report. Sorry that I can't see you. Obviously, incredibly challenging time for you, and I'm sorry that you've got this burden. What I wanted to ask is, are you able just to touch on, and particularly in relation to matters on this panel, but perhaps you might want to answer generally, but will you, as part of the recovery from this, is it your plan to look at all opportunities? And I mean two things in particular. Firstly, do you have members of your team who are scouring for every single grant and every single opportunity for funding that we might be able to achieve? And secondly, is this an opportunity to look afresh at where the council can be charging for services, even if that is just on a temporary basis for the next year or two, while there's a financial recovery? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else at the moment? No. Okay. Caroline, please.
All right. So this is to start off with Councillor Olmera's questions. So this report is the September report that we took to Cabinet then, and Para 210.2 refers to period 4 monitoring. I said that we've already published period 6 monitoring, and what we showed there is that the cost of COVID, gross cost is 28 million, and then we've got 14.2 million of grants. So that does include the latest information on grants, which, well, it includes up to information at that time. We've brought that report to you because that includes the last tranche of the 2.4 million that we got. Clearly, there's been additional grants announced from going into tier 3 and business support grants, but those come with additional responsibilities and duties. So the grants that we've got, the 14.2 to date, are to cover the general expenditure. That monitoring report also references the sales fees and charges grant. We are waiting for government colleagues to certify our claim and then make payment on it. And the report references that, but there's been some delays. So whilst we thought we would originally get it for October, it's now going to be mid to late November. So when we get that announcement, then we will feed those figures into the latest monitoring then as well. And with regards to, I think, was it your question, the shortfall in 1920 savings therefore would have an impact on this year's monitoring?
Well, I understand in terms of with the savings this year, quite a bit of that is obviously from transport that wasn't used, and so therefore the outturn will actually, because you need more transport when children do go to school and what have you. So the outturn at the moment is a £2 million saving on CYP, but you had already anticipated a £1 million saving this year. So therefore, has that happened? And if it hasn't, and if it did happen, would that figure more likely to look like a £3 million saving at the end of the year for an outturn? So because you mentioned at the beginning in terms of savings not appropriate at the stage because of COVID across the council. So therefore, have the savings which had anticipated to be made in terms of reorganisation within Rachel's area, has that happened? Because I know that was forecast to save around about £1 million.
So again,
I think Rachel's got her hand up, by the way, Caroline.
I gotta say, so referencing the monitoring report, there was savings of 2.9 million within children's schools and families, and the shortfall that is currently being forecast is 734k, and that has been factored into the outturn position that's been reported for children's schools and families, which has changed to, if you just bear with me, has
1.229.
1.29 and again.
Yeah.
So
can I just ask you a generic question? Because obviously, like when we actually get the papers and we do actually go through and actually look through the business plan, because obviously you're actually at the meeting. So if this report is outdated, and I think from what you're saying there's a more up-to-date report, why don't we get that? That might be a question for the chair, but why haven't we got the most up-to-date report?
So I've brought the business plan to you. This is the latest business plan because we didn't bring one to October. So therefore I've come to actually talk you through this. The report references month 4 monitoring. I have actually mentioned the fact that we do have month 6 monitoring now available and published. So those are some of the numbers I've been referring to, but this is the latest business plan report that we have before Monday night.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add something, Caroline? I'm sure that for the next meeting it will be updated. Is that right?
Yes, definitely.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Holmes.
Yes, Councillor Holmes' question. So certainly we are making sure that we are maximising all grant opportunities. So clearly there are quite a few different grants coming through. Sort of ranging from homelessness, rough sleeping, and we have been looking at a decarbonisation fund, so actually something that's non-COVID to see, because obviously linked with the climate change emergency and wanting to aim for being carbon neutral by 2030, there are some funds available but with very short timescales. So see if we can, with some of the works that need to be done in our corporate buildings, can we look to make some grant funding to do some of the works that need to be done. Certainly we are looking at options around where we can increase our income. It's quite limited, but certainly we are exploring as much as possible. And certainly some of the other commercial areas that we had been expanding into, we have suffered there. So again, we just need to be careful about what we go for. But this, I think, has been unprecedented. The loss of income that we've seen in certain areas then hasn't been covered by the sales fees and charges. So again, it's just making sure that what we go for can be sustainable. But certainly, yes, we are looking to maximise all grant opportunities and also come where we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Councillor, oh, I've forgotten the name. Let me find it. I know it.
Councillor
Omar Bush. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Yes, thank you, Caroline Holland. The draft plans it was very detailed, and it was an interesting read, especially going into lockdown. So kept me up. So one of the queries that I had was in regards to the departmental base budget. So there's a line of other with a incremental increase over the next 4 years. So I just wanted to find out what that increase was and whether there was a breakdown of that. So it moves from 733 all the way to 973 from 2020, so 21-22 to 24-25.
So yes, there will be a breakdown, but I don't have it to hand, so I'll look to share that to be circulated with the minutes, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, yeah, brilliant, thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Anyone else? No. Okay. Oh yes. Councillor Makin, please. Go ahead.
What do you think of the chances of the government actually keeping to their promise of paying for COVID, which they said they would and they haven't done?
So I think it's been quite challenging because I don't think we still thought we would be in this level of COVID restrictions that we are now. Certainly there has been, with moving into the national lockdown from midnight tonight, additional funding that's come through for clinically extremely vulnerable, for business support, as well as for businesses that are closed. So there are some additional funds coming through, but as I said earlier, some of it's for additional responsibilities, and some of it ends at the end of this financial year. So it's the challenge then of the ongoing impacts being picked up through the spending review. And whilst I think in some ways it's good that it's a one-year spending review, we need to make sure that we can get to maximise the monies that we need. Otherwise, I think it's going to be quite challenging for our services and our residents. But fingers crossed.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we can go back. Councillor Humroy.
Yeah, can I just respond to that, Councillor Makin? We did actually touch on that earlier because that has actually come from government isn't plan. That's what Caroline Holland had mentioned before. So she did mention the figure of nearly £15 million that's already come from government, and also other areas that she hasn't actually applied for yet. So therefore, any of the funding from government isn't actually in here at the moment.
Well, to make this a political meeting, you can if you want, but that means that there's still 15 million missing that the government had promised and not delivered. Even if you find grant of 5 million, there's still going to be 10 million missing.
Well, I think that we just need to wait for the updated report to make a comment on that, really.
Yeah. I've already asked if it will be updated, Councillor Makin, and it will be for the next time round. Okay. Thanks. Can we move on now? Yes? Okay.
So,
thank you, Caroline.
As I say, if it's okay, I'll take my leave off you.
Yes, I think. Right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So the next on the agenda is Rachel, please. Director of Children, Schools and Families, and its impact of COVID-19.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep this brief. Last time when I was briefing you, it was the first chance you'd had to hear from me since the COVID lockdown had been put in place, and so I had quite a lot of ground to cover, but really we've just had a month since the last time I spoke, so some of the things that I've talked about then I won't repeat. What I will say is that we managed to stagger through, I guess, with our schools to the end of the first half term. It's been very challenging in terms of making sure that schools have stayed open, but I'm pleased and proud to say that every Merton school stayed open all the way through to half term to some degree. There were some schools which had to close bubbles or in some cases year groups, but overall the majority of schools were fully open and all schools were open, as I say, to some extent. I think people were relieved when it got to half term. It had been very difficult to maintain staffing levels in some schools, but children have returned at the start of this week, and we go into what is notoriously the most difficult phase in education in every year, whether we have COVID or not. These weeks in the run up to Christmas are very challenging for just regular levels of illness, absence, things passing through schools, and it's notoriously a very long term, but people have come back in good spirits and had a good break and are working to support children and families. The new restrictions that are imposed in the expectation that schools and childcare settings will stay open, and that's open for all pupils, not just the children of key workers and vulnerable children. So we don't have yet the full numbers of children back in school. I receive daily reports from the DFE, but we have nearly 20,000 children in Merton schools attending yesterday. So at its height in the last half term, it was nearer to 25,000. So there are still some schools either not reporting their children or where the children aren't yet back. And some of that, we're testing that out with the schools this week, but some of that may be because of parental concern in the light of the new restrictions. So we've met already with secondary heads. We'll be meeting with the primary cluster leads tomorrow, and we'll have more to report, no doubt, later in the week as the dust has settled a little. Because the schools are still open, the expectation is that all of our education division support will continue to schools, so there will still be staff in that division visiting schools where necessary to engage in one-to-one support with children and young people, or where it's appropriate to deliver other services, although clearly much of our work continues to be virtual where that is more appropriate. In relation to children's social care, I let you know last time that we were experiencing some challenges in the service around volume of work. That was because it was becoming increasingly difficult to progress cases through the courts. There isn't sufficient court time to hear all the family hearings, and the consequence of that is that children are unable in some cases to achieve permanency or to have their plans progressed as quickly as we would do in ordinary times, and with referrals continuing at the front door, the consequence is that there's a bunching of work in our safeguarding and care planning services, and we've tackled that by trying to redistribute the work across teams that ordinarily wouldn't carry it. So these are social workers in other teams who wouldn't normally have the child protection work, but are being asked to pick up some of the more long-term cases there. So at the moment we are managing that increase in demand within our service resources, but it's easy to see that pressure starting to appear in caseloads and in the work that's being handled. We've also seen increasing vulnerability, particularly in our younger children, so under 5s and most significantly in under 1s, and have had some very concerning cases referred to us in the recent past, which suggests that there's a particular increased vulnerability around that cohort. Again, the new guidance that has been issued clearly sees this as critical public service. There's nothing that's come out in the guidance since the Prime Minister's announcements at the weekend that suggests that we should be standing down our current operating model. On that basis, the majority of our visits are undertaken face-to-face, and only in a limited number of cases are they virtual, where it's more appropriate to do so. Where necessary, we're supplying PPE to our social workers, but we're also asking people undertaking visits to kind of be flexible and creative in the way that they approach those visits to find ways of maintaining social distance where the visit takes place. I think that we will monitor the situation under the new guidance. So as I say, it doesn't demand very significant changes of our work. The only things that we've had to stand down are the things that one could argue are more social than kind of therapeutic. So we're not allowed to run youth work. Youth groups anymore. We can do youth support, and we can do one-to-one work with vulnerable young people, but we can't run a youth club, can't run a youth centre. Those have to close. The similar sort of thing is true for things like kind of parent and toddler sessions, which are there for kind of recreation, although our parenting courses, where those are support for new parents, are under the guidance allowed to continue, and the first one goes ahead to tomorrow. So I think that's probably brings us bang up to date. We'll continue to monitor the way that the service performs under these new arrangements and with the new guidance, and look optimistically over the next 4 weeks in the hope that that reduces community transmission and allows all of these essential services to stay open and running.
Thank you. Before we ask any questions, at the last meeting, we weren't able to get the data that we wanted. Because of Ofsted being around. So, Carl, would you be able to give us some data, please? I don't know, he's here. He's muted. Oh, here he is.
Hi. I'm sorry. No, I haven't. The reason for providing the COVID data last time, it was a one-off. It was in lieu of the normal performance information that you receive. We had a particular impasse at the last time, as it landed right in the middle of Ofsted, which meant that my team was unable to provide the regular performance update. However, I did think it was useful to provide some contextual information to what Rachel was saying at the last meeting. Apologies, Chair, I hadn't realised that this was a request for this meeting, so there isn't anything in addition to what Rachel has provided that I have right now. I understood this was to be a verbal update.
We have the full performance data in the papers.
Oh, fine. I just knew that when I said yes, it's fine to go ahead, I said we can have some theory, but we'd like to have the data next time. But never mind, it's okay, as long as there is something there for us to read. Okay. Any questions, anyone? James, yes. James, go ahead, please. Councillor Holmes.
Oh, sorry. I did want to ask a question, but I didn't think I'd indicated. But thank you very much. You always read my mind, Chair. So thank you.
Oh, it's signed up.
I just my question is, and as I said in my first question, it's obviously extremely challenging times, and Rachel, you and the whole team have done a fantastic job. So no criticism inferred at all. But given what we're reading about the importance of young people, children being in schools, and the impact on their mental health of not being in schools, to still be 5,000 down is a worry, isn't it? And I just wondered what strategies there are to try to reduce that figure.
Okay, just a minute. Anybody else? Okay. Yes, can you go ahead? Lord, sorry, I keep forgetting names. Mr. Hamid. Mansour?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rachel, for the report. I've got two questions. My first question is, how would you reduce the caseloads in the safeguarding service, which increased in the number of children in needs and number of child protection cases? And my second question is, what additional support for schools have been planned in terms of number of positive COVID-19 cases, which is rapidly increasing throughout the country?
Okay, if we can go ahead with those, please.
Okay, responding to Councillor Holmes first. So it's too soon, Councillor Holmes, to decide that it's a worry. So we quite often find that the numbers around the start and end of a break are different. So we've been following this data daily throughout the COVID period, and we wouldn't normally have this data at all. It's an unusual requirement on schools, and it isn't statutory. So schools sometimes don't respond because they've got other things that are keeping them busy, and they sometimes do respond, but the DFE website doesn't take their data. So I can't always tell what the cause is of a drop in numbers, and I would say it's quite common around the start and end of term, and I would leave it usually several days before determining that there was a worry. So at this stage I'm not worried. I would be worried if the numbers stay depressed below 20,000 next week, and I suppose I would remind all members that this term, notoriously, numbers of children will always be out of school whether there's COVID or not, because it's a term classically where there's quite a lot of sickness absence anyway, and we will have more children out for COVID related reasons. So too soon to be worried yet, but we will absolutely keep an eye on it, and that is why we monitor it daily. Where we do find situations where children are absent from school, although we think that they should be there, we have a children missing education protocol, and we follow up with schools, and particularly for children with an education, health and care plan, or children with a social worker, then we pursue those with extra diligence, and had a number of occasions last term where we were able to, in the before summer holidays, where we were able to show that undertaking those meetings had led to an increase in children attending. So we've got quite a lot of confidence in our responses if we decide that we need to worry, but our starting point is to wait for the data to catch up with the start of term before we decide for sure that we've got a problem there.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Holmes, did you want to follow up?
No, I just said thank you. Thank you.
Then Mansour, you had two questions. One was around how to reduce caseloads. The short answer to the question is the way caseloads are calculated is it's the total number of cases divided by the number of social workers available to do those cases. So you either reduce caseloads by reducing the number of cases, or you reduce caseloads by increasing the number of social workers. We may find ourselves having to increase the number of social workers on a temporary basis to work all of these cases safely, and that is something that we are actively considering. We can't safely reduce the number of cases unless we progress the plans that these children are on, and for the reasons that I described, most particularly the slowdown in the courts, we can't progress those plans as quickly as we would want to at this time. So that's partly what's causing the backlog. As an interim measure, what we've done is we've allocated, as I was indicating, we've allocated some of those cases that would normally be held in safeguarding and care planning into some of the other teams, which is almost like adding more social workers. Kind of spreads the work a little, but those wouldn't ordinarily be the practitioners who are dealing with those kind of cases. They are social workers, they're social work qualified, and they're social work practitioners, but they belong to other teams with different kind of case composition usually. So that's very much a temporary measure, but that is how we deal with it, either by increasing the number of social workers or getting the cases out of the system. And then the second was additional support for schools where they have positive numbers of children testing positive. The good news overall is that although cases are rising nationally, and they're rising in Merton too, we haven't had large numbers of schools with large numbers of cases. So we have had a small number of schools with a small number of cases, obviously greater numbers of children and staff self-isolating, but not necessarily catching and transmitting the disease. There are special arrangements for schools where a positive case is reported, so they are supported by our public health team. Where they have an outbreak, which is a number of cases, they're able to contact LCRC, which is the local COVID response centre, for advice, and there's also a Department for Education helpline for them. But mostly we found that the support from the public health team for their health advice is very welcome, and schools find it's usually exactly what they need. And then the education division itself provides additional advice and support for the school and how to manage all of the kind of attendant eventualities. So you know, how you manage kind of redistributing your classes if you've got certain numbers of staff off, how you might manage if you've got administrative staff or catering staff off, because obviously it's not just teaching staff who may catch COVID or may have to self-isolate. So we're there to advise and support them throughout. And then for children and young people who are self-isolating or are COVID positive, schools are required under the legislation to provide online learning for them. And so we've been supporting schools to develop their online platforms, and those are to a greater or lesser degree, because schools had different levels of kind of prior skill in this area, but those online platforms are all working to support those children, and where children still don't have access to digital devices or Wi-Fi, we're able to support them through a range of means, including the DfE's own allocation, but also resources that have been made available within the council and through voluntary sector organisations to get laptops or tablets or Wi-Fi dongles or whatever they need in order for them to be able to access their learning that way. So I hope that indicates the kind of range of support that's available to schools and perhaps more importantly to pupils if there's a COVID situation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stringer, did you want to add anything? Can't hear you.
No, sorry, I've unmuted myself now. I think Rachel's done an excellent job of describing the work that's gone on in the department. Happy to answer any specific questions aimed at me. As she said, it's been a very busy period and we have a lot to thank Rachel and her team for.
Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rachel. I just want to find out, do you have a data of how many children receive supermarket vouchers so far? And on the other hand, will the youth centres be closed during this new lockdown? And if they're going to close, what supports are in place for the young people that are...
Gone quiet.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. What supports are will be put in place for the young people that attend the youth centre if in case it should close?
Okay, can I take two more and then come back to you, and then it can be answered. Councillor Kajina, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rachel. I'd like to sort of follow on to Mr. Ahmed's question about the COVID. As this time of year is flu season, there's bound to be a lot of flu. How are we going to sort of, should I say, how are the schools going to manage not to get them mixed up with COVID, rather than getting children sent home because they've got flu? The symptoms are supposed to be quite similar. So how are we going to manage to make sure that they know it's flu rather than COVID, and then we don't have all these issues of kids being sent home when they've only got flu? So that's quite important, because I have parents really trying to find out what to do when this situation arises.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. Obviously, I was inspired to put my hand up when Rachel talked about access to computers for children working from home, but she answered the question, so I don't need to ask that one.
Right, okay, thank you.
But I can ask another one about attendance instead. If a child is in contact with COVID, they're supposed to self-isolate for 2 weeks. their family, presumably, which means not in school. Now, Ofsted count attendance as one of their criteria for looking at the school, and if the child's off school for 2 weeks, even though they're working from home, does that count as being off school or not?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we can answer those 3 questions, please. So, I think they're for you, Rachel.
Yeah, sure. First was in relation to supermarket vouchers. I presume you're referring to the period over half term where the council agreed to step in and fund those children who were eligible for free school meals. We haven't yet had a full accounting of what the schools provided over that period. So the requirement was for them to claim on their return this week. And so we're just working through those claims. The last time I checked, there had been 16 claims made, I think, out of our 57 schools. So we're obviously expecting more claims to be made. And once all the claims are in, I will be able to answer that question. But they're starting to come in, and the arrangement was that they would start to claim retrospectively this week rather than working through the whole of half term. So that was the supermarket vouchers. In relation to the youth centres, the guidance is really clear that youth centres have to close, and so yes, you're right to be concerned. Those are going to cease to operate. However, we can still provide one-to-one youth work, and we can provide support groups for young people, which is slightly different. And so things like so where we've got children with special educational needs, so for example the Magic Club is still allowed to operate, and that's going to be very important for those young people. And we can put in place responsive support work where if an issue arises. So the combination of keeping support groups open for our vulnerable young people, responding with one-to-one youth work where necessary, and standing up a support group if there is some incident in the community that requires a support response, will help us to manage what it means for young people out of youth centres during this time. But we don't have an option on this one. The guidance is really clear that youth centres do unfortunately have to close. And I guess I have a level of understanding about why, given the age groups involved and the kind of close proximity. So that makes a kind of sense to me. And we're pleased to still be able to offer support arrangements where that's necessary. And nothing to stop us doing online stuff, of course, which we did successfully during the last lockdown and will continue to do throughout. Agatha, you were asking, Councillor Agadikis, sorry, you were asking around COVID and the flu season. So the symptoms are actually relatively distinct. It is a new persistent cough. It is a loss of smell and or taste. And it's a fever at 37.8 or above, and those tend not to be overlapping entirely with the symptoms of flu. If a child actually has flu, as opposed to kind of a cough or a cold, they shouldn't be at school anyway, actually. But the normal kind of coughs and colds of the winter season are quite distinguishable, both from flu and from COVID. However, if there's any doubt, if a child is symptomatic and they go home, then children are tested, and it's only if there is a positive test result that the child has to then stay off for the length of time that COVID requires, and that any one they've come into contact with will self-isolate. So we're not sending children home because they have symptoms of other illnesses, and children are obviously being sent home if they're too unwell to be in school, but we're not sending them home for symptoms of other illnesses, and we're not sending them home if they've had contact with children who have some symptoms until or unless a positive test result comes back, and that's the basis on which they are then confined to home, and their close contacts have to self-isolate. And I would add, because I think it was a question in Russell and Councillor Makin's question, which was about if they are isolating and their family has to isolate. It is if you have contact with a positive COVID case, you have to isolate, but the rest of your household doesn't. It's only if you then become positive that the rest of your household does, and that guidance has been consistent for a very long time. So we won't have rolling isolations as a result of contacts in school. I'll move on to the attendance question. Yes, in ordinary times, Ofsted will judge a school by attendance. I think it's fair to say all bets are off. Certainly they can't use the standard attendance measure at this point in time to measure any attendance. There are just too many variables. It wouldn't give any kind of consistent measure of attendance. And they're looking much more closely when they inspect us and also when they inspect schools at attendance for children who are vulnerable and what we're doing to make sure those young people are supported. So I think they're asking slightly different questions around attendance at the moment. But certainly when a child is at home and engaged in online learning, so they're self-isolating, but they're not sick, so they are engaged in school through online learning, that is attendance. That they are counted as attending for the purposes of their learning. What they won't be counted as in school for the purposes of the DfE's count of children who are in school, if that makes sense.
Thank you. No, you can't come
Claire,
back.
if I can chip in.
Yeah, oh yes, Eleanor, go ahead, please.
Can I chip in just on some of those questions? So firstly about the supermarket vouchers. So yeah, we at Merton Council as an administration chose to kind of step up where the government wasn't and recognise the extraordinary circumstances that families are in. And we, so firstly, I'd like to thank the officers for their time and my colleagues for their support in finding the funds to support those families. The schools, who, as Rachel said, are the kind of conduit for that funding, so thanks very much for their efforts. But on top of that, we're really lucky to have a very strong community of provision, both from the charity but also the private sector, who have been supporting our families. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank, in particular, businesses such as Tesco and O'Halloran O'Brien, who provided substantial amounts of funding to feed children over the past weeks. But I know that beyond that, there have been many smaller cafes and restaurants, some individuals who've been doing a lot of work, and I'd like to pass my thanks to them. Just on the point about testing, I'm part of the health and wellbeing community subgroup focused on COVID, and we met last night. And the very clear message coming through from the medical community there is people were a bit worried about testing early on because there were lots of delays, and there has been increased capacity locally. And we really need to make clear that if you do have symptoms, there will be a test available. So please do investigate that and don't think, oh, it'll be difficult to do. I won't do that. We urge everyone who has symptoms, as Rachel said, even if they're a child, to go and get tested.
Okay, thank you. Right, Russell, no, I don't think so, unless it's really urgent, because we need to move on, and I need to ask a couple of questions. So is it urgent? Right, Russell? He's talking to himself. Is it urgent? Okay, forget it. I'd like to say thank you very much to the team for the really hard work that you're doing. And so if you could pass that on to the whole team, because it just looks like this is the team, but it isn't. It's much more than that happening. And I think reading through all these notes that you're doing a grand job, and I hope you'll be able to continue that. In the meantime, though, I have a couple of questions. And before I do the questions, one is to say that there is actually, I don't know how many people know that, but there's a food bank on a Friday, and we start operating from 10 o'clock until 1 in Pollard's Hill at the Roman Catholic Church at the Hall. And some Fridays we have 90 people turning up. And, you know, we do that with the help of lots of outside agents and food. And it's not, it's everything. We call it the Fresh Food Bank because it's got everything. You'd really think you're in a supermarket. So if there's anybody who needs help, send them to us, please, especially if they're local. And we will help them during holidays anytime. And the other bit, I couldn't find quite where to put it, but under safeguarding, I think Rachel might be the best place. And what I want to ask is, I'm not going to go into the long story, but most of us know that there was a recent incident in Collier's Wood. I thought it was Mitcham, and now we found out it's Collier's Wood. I just want to know how we safeguard children from they attend to school and we should know they're there. And most schools, the doors are locked. Well, not the doors, but the gates. And so I just wondered how we safeguard them without looking at this particular incident, because we can't do that. So I don't mind who answers that one, Eleanor or Rachel, be fine.
So we can't closely protect children everywhere all the time. And it's really important that children learn to navigate the world safely. So it's quite ordinary for children, for example, to walk to and from school by themselves, particularly secondary age children. As you say, without going into the details of the very recent incident, there was nothing about the child involved in that incident that was a safeguarding risk in that child's behaviour. The safeguarding risk was that there was a perpetrator in the community who engaged in a behaviour that was very dangerous. And so so we do have statutory bodies who are there to safeguard children. So as you say, children are safe in school. Our health services help to protect children through all of the many interactions they have with children and with families. And the police and social workers are also there to safeguard children. But when our young people are in the community, living their lives as young people should, it's the community itself that protects and safeguards those children. And we had a really startlingly good example of that in this situation because another young person identified the fact that this child was coming to harm, alerted some older members of the community who were able to confront the perpetrator. And I think one of the ways that we ensure that children are safeguarded is by recognising that safeguarding is everyone's business, and by not being a bystander, but if we see something that our instincts tell us is wrong, taking action. So brave action was taken on this occasion, and sometimes that's what it takes for the community to respond to keep children safe from harm. So our statutory agencies stood up very well on this occasion, but there's a broader community responsibility, and it was heartwarming, I think, to see it being exercised.
Thank you. I think, Omar, did you want to say something again? Did you want to speak? Omar?
No, my question was earlier, but it's fine. It wasn't important, so it's okay. Thank you.
Right, okay then, thank you. And I think that's it really for that one. Department update report, please. And again, is Rachel.
So I'm sorry it's such a one-woman show. There's a little bit of repetition in this, I think, from last time, but I've tried to encourage my services who contribute much of the information to this report to only bring your attention to things that are new from a month ago. What you have in this report, again, is a walkthrough of the service areas in the Children's Schools and Families Directorate, outlining what's been going on for them during this period since we last met. I'll come back, if I may, Carl, to the overview shortly. I'll kind of tail it at the end, the first segments of the report, you have got all of children's social care and the youth inclusion division. Some of what I was relaying earlier to you appears in this report, because of course COVID is our real life these days. So I was talking about the COVID impact, but it's playing out here. So you've got some commentary about MASH and first response, some commentary about safeguarding and care planning. If you could scroll on down, please, Carl. Then the permanency and looked after team and access to resources. So this is for children who are in our care. If you continue scrolling, Carl, quality assurance and practice development, which is where our independent reviewing officers sit, where our child protection conference chairs sit. And we've got the training and development also under that heading. the Adolescent and Family Service, which incorporates our youth justice team, the team that is tackles exploitation, the team that deals with knife crime. And you'll see that just there on page 9, we, as a scrutiny request, so scrutiny panel members have asked us to comment on knife crime and how things are going in relation to knife crime each time we submit this departmental update. So it's just a short paragraph there. Basically, our response to knife crime sits within the violence reduction plan overall. It's largely responds to a set of requirements from MOPAC, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and we review and monitor that through the Safer and Stronger partnership. And so we've got a very responsive team there dealing with incidents of knife crime as they arise. If you scroll on, Carl, the other main division in the Directorate is the Education Division. Lots of the work of the School Improvement Team is elaborated here. And then we have a scrutiny request, which Councillor Bush raised last time we met, which was in relation to some of the commentary I had given to Black Lives Matter. And the question that I was asked was about the work that we were doing with schools around anti-racism. So there is some detail for you there in the report. Scroll on, Carl. So education inclusion, another service. So this is just this has multiple different elements within it, so there's a paragraph really for each of the different parts there. And then in early years family wellbeing and early help, another scrutiny request was in relation to the funded places, so how we're getting on with making sure that families entitled to funded places are taking up those places, which is always quite a labour of love, you know, that we have to do a lot of encouragement to ensure participation, and no time more so, I would say, than under COVID. Keep going, Carl, it's fine. I'm doing a whistle-stop tour, partly because there's so much in this report, partly because I'm expecting that people will have read it and be more interested in the questions they might want to ask me. But moving on, there was another scrutiny request in relation to special educational needs. You were just on it, Carl. So around the SEND service and the work that we've been doing there, COVID has caused quite a slowdown in the processing of applications for education, health and care plans, but no slowdown in those applications being made. So this is an area of kind of performance difficulty for us, which I have to acknowledge. Carry on, Carl. And then contracts and school organisation. You had a little bit of an update from Tom last time about the Harris Academy, but this also includes our school admissions, and we've just closed during half term the applications for school admissions. So there's lots of processing now going on in that team. Another scrutiny request that's linked to that team is the SEND provision, so that we try always to reduce our cost in the DSG, the Dedicated Schools Grant, because that is having an impact on the Council General Fund balances. And one of the ways that we're trying to do that is by securing more SEND provision in the borough. So we had some questions about what we're doing there. And so the projects and the schools and places that are related to that is updated in that scrutiny request. Scroll on, please, Carl. Carl's own team, the Performance Policy and Partnerships team, is covered there. And then we also have, we share with Public Health a joint commissioning and partnerships team, and unfortunately wasn't able to secure an update because of sickness absence in that team. But one of the big things that they're doing for us at the moment is that they're recommissioning the educational occupational therapy, which we haven't been satisfied with the delivery of that over the recent past, and so we're making some important changes there, and they're undertaking that work for us. So that was a fast whiz through the headlines there. Carl, if you could bear to scoot back up to the summary. Sorry to do it that way round, but I just wanted panel members to have been fully cited, I guess, on the rest of the report. So the other thing that I wanted to mention was our on-site visit. So you may recall that in last time's report, I'd said that we were anticipating an Ofsted visit, but by the time we actually sat down for scrutiny, the visit had been announced. So that visit went ahead in the week beginning the 5th of October, and we are awaiting the publication of the visit letter from that visit. So that is due to be published on the 20th of November. And the way of these things is that the draft is confidential until such time as the letter is published. But I can say that I think that members will be overall will regard it as a positive letter. There was a pleasing recognition of the work that the service, the whole of the Children's Schools and Families Directorate really had done, and the wider community of Merton to kind of look after children and families during this difficult period. And so I think when that report is published, you will be very satisfied with the work of the service.
Thank you very much, Rachel. You probably need some water now. Probably thirsty. Any questions from anyone? Yeah, okay. Councillor Henry, anybody else?
And me, please, Chair, when there's time.
Oh, yes, I'm Councillor Holmes. I keep looking for you, sorry.
Thank you.
And yes, okay. And Councillor Elmroyd, yeah. Okay, Councillor Henry, please.
Right, okay. I just want to say thank you, Rachel. And not only that, I would like to say thanks to Unique Talent also. I saw them on the telly on Monday night, and they were delivering and talking about the work that they've done with young people within school, within prison, other organization. I just like to say thanks for all the support from MOPAC that they gave to Unique Talent, so they were able to support our young people. You know, that's what I just want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. The report, I have read the report, and obviously by necessity it's focused on the response to COVID, and there's really a lot of very positive things here. There was it was highlighted in one place, it doesn't really matter, I don't think you'll need to go to it, Rachel, but 2.57, that processing the increase in applications for free school meals had proved challenging, which is understandable. So my question is, are we now on top of that? Because it did stand out in a report that otherwise makes clear that most things we are on top of as much as we can. So that was my question. Another question which isn't in the report, so forgive me for asking it, and it may be you just want to address it very briefly this evening, but is there an opportunity, given all the laptops and other devices that have been made available, is there an opportunity to actually use these to enhance learning, keeping in mind there's an ongoing task group on this subject? And whilst I appreciate, Rachel, that you won't have had a lot of time to think about this given all that's on, perhaps that's something that could be put on the agenda for further thought, because some good can come out of these extra resources. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Haley-Hamroy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Rachel, you mentioned before in terms of younger children, particularly babies and children under 5 coming into harm's way. And in with section 2.44, talk about the great idea about launching an online baby programme for families with babies aged 1 month to 7 months and an online toddler programme. You mentioned that the take-up was a lot higher than expected, and so therefore further programmes were scheduled to meet demand. I was wondering in terms of what was the take-up of that offering, by how much was it a lot higher than expected, and how quickly are you able to offer further programmes to meet the demand? And then on a completely unrelated topic question, within section 2.6, because we did ask for details of the PFI contracts, there isn't a lot of information within there, and I'm wondering whether or not you can actually flesh out in terms of what's actually been happening with any of the issues that are actually happening with the PFI contractors, and in terms of what the meetings with directors have been about recently. Thank you.
And thank you, Rachel, please.
Yeah, so if I may take Councillor Ormerod's first on this occasion. So I will say that Hayley is very helpful to me because she often gives me advance warning of these questions. And in relation to the parenting programmes, I have put that question into the system, but we've had a lot going on today and I haven't had the answer back yet. So I will have to give you a written answer afterwards, Hayley, and I'm sorry about that. You were very decent by giving me a heads up that that question was coming. So okay. I apologise that I don't have an answer for you this evening.
No problem.
In relation to the PFI question, I'm going to tread carefully here because, of course, this is a commercial contract. So what I will say is that the schools have, who are within the contract, have expressed considerable dissatisfaction with the way that it's being delivered. That's both in relation to the kind of hard facilities management, which is the maintenance of the buildings, so things like windows, fire doors, etc., school playing fields, and other things, and also the so-called soft services, so things like school meals and cleaning, and therefore it's those issues that we are in discussion with the provider about at this point in time, and we are reviewing all our options there, including so-called step-in arrangements, which is where the local authority itself may step in to undertake some work and then charge that back to the provider, or indeed the prospect of removing some or all provision from the contract. So those are the kind of things that we're in discussion about at the moment. As you might imagine, going into more detail in a public meeting is probably not appropriate, but those are the headlines. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could I just mention, if you share anything with an individual, can you share it with all of us, please? Because it probably will just be needed for all of us anyway.
Oh yes, I'll provide that answer back to Stella for Councillor Ormerod. Yes, yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Henry, please.
So Councillor Holmes' questions, one was about the opportunity to enhance learning with the greater number of digital devices available. I would absolutely encourage that to be part of the thinking in the task group, and certainly it is part of our ongoing thinking and discussion with schools. I mean, we're always looking, I guess, at what the schools can deliver and how technology of all types can be used. But we have to be mindful all the time of what technology young people have access to, and so the more technology young people have access to, the more equitable any proposals will be for enhanced digital learning. So yes, you're also right that we haven't been digging into that deeply at this point in time. We've been mostly working on just making sure that young people are able to access the platform that their school has for them if they are having to learn remotely. But I do think that it will give us a good basis for going forward if we're able to secure full coverage. I mean, we don't yet have full coverage, but you know, obviously that continues. In relation to free school meals, yes, I mean, I think the reflection about the challenge in processing them was as much to draw members' attention to the increase in poverty in the community as to grumble about the pressure on the service. So we've had an increase of a significant increase. So when we were preparing for half term, we had over 6,000 children on our books who were eligible on income grounds for free school meals, and so probably about 1,000 of those have been newly processed over the COVID period. Obviously, we had some pre-existing entitlement, so that's a very significant increase for us. But my understanding is that we're all up to date, although there will be continuing new eligible claims as the kind of economic conditions bite for our families. So to the best of my understanding, the team is on top of it, but it's a big number and it's an increased pressure. And then finally, Councillor Henry, thank you for your kind remarks, and unique talent absolutely deserve your plaudits.
I think she wants to add something too.
I haven't seen anything in your report about foster carers or children in foster care. Is there any updates? I mean, I know this is a very difficult time for everyone, but do you have any updates about, you know, foster carers or children in care, or you know, the adopted system, anything?
So there's a little bit of information under permanency looked after children and the access to resources team. So we've talked a little bit about the new foster carers that we've been able to recruit. So 5 new foster households approved, and one of which was a connected carer, and being able to approve new supported lodgings. You're right, there isn't much more than that, partly because it's very individual. So over this period, we've worked really hard on stability for children in their homes, whether they are with foster carers or whether they are with whether they're in residential care, and we have had a reasonable amount of success with that. But as lockdown lifted, some of the pressures in the system have led to placement moves for some of our young people. But because our number of looked after children is low, and because when things go wrong with the placement, it's quite personal and individualised. It doesn't feel like the right sort of thing to cover in detail in a report. So if there are particular other things that you'd like to know about foster care in Merton or about children looked after, I can. I mean, there's an annual fostering report. There is an annual adoption report. All of that material gets scrutinised at the corporate parenting board. I could privately make arrangements for those reports to be circulated.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Last here, apart from yes, I'm coming. Councillor Haley, I have seen your question and I'll deal with it in a minute. Yes, Councillor Hamroyd Bush. Councillor Bush? Councillor Bush?
Thank you, and thank you very much for the update, Rachel. One of my questions is in regards to whether we know or have identified the children that were potentially academically impacted from the first lockdown, and whether the schools have managed to identify them and us as a council are trying to support them to ensure that they catch up with their peers who may have had the resources to kind of learn during that period when schools were closed. And my second question, which kind of follows on from the lockdowns, and I don't know whether Councillor Stringer may be better placed in answering this question, it's in relation to the mental health and well-being of young people and how they've been affected with this, with these unprecedented times and uncertainty, whether it's in school and out of school, and just seeing what the council are doing in supporting them and ensuring that they're supported from every angle, whether it's from the council or the schools directly.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Rachel, please.
Okay, so in relation to supporting individual children, the council isn't an educator, so what we don't do is directly provide programs to individual children. We support the schools to do that work. So I don't have, and my department doesn't have, a record of individual children and their individual amount of delay as a result of lockdown. But the schools are absolutely doing that work, and they have been. So I can't tell you what number of children and how far behind in which individual schools, nor would I expect us to at any stage be able to do that. It would be quite an impossible data collection. And we talked a little bit about this last time, that the points at which those measures are taken are in public exams at the end of Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5, and also at the end of Key Stage 2, but not in between. So the council won't be collecting that information about individual delay, but schools are doing that work, and they are putting in place support responses to those children who have fallen behind. And it's our role as a council to support the schools to do that through the development of training programmes, through the support to their various networks, including their special educational needs network, their safeguarding leads network, where in some cases the reason why a child has fallen behind is because their well-being is affected in a kind of more holistic way, and you have to make a child safe and well in order for them to be ready to learn. So those are the kind of activities that we're engaged in support of schools. And we're still meeting on a very regular basis with our secondary head teachers and with the leads of primary clusters, directing additional material to them daily in the daily update. So that's the kind of support that's going in, and some of that is in relation, obviously, to remedial learning, but some of it is in relation to all of the other things that are going on for schools at this time. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific about individual children's kind of delay, but that's not something that the council would or should collect, nor is it resourced to address. In relation to mental health and wellbeing, this is something that we work on with our CCG partners. So we have a CAMS commissioning partnership. CAMS is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, a commissioning partnership which engages public health commissioners, children's services commissioners, CCG commissioners together, and we have. We work on firstly funding for mental health provision. We commission the services. Some of those are include things like Couth, which is an online service. Some of it is connected to the Mental Health Trailblazers work, which now involves a significant number of our schools. Within Keith Shipman's service, which is the Education Inclusion Service, one of his senior officers has been trained for the Return to Education Wellbeing Package, which is part of central government offer to all schools, and that is being joined up with our Trailblazer work and being put in place through all schools. So the network of different mental health responses is quite well connected through our CAMS partnership, and there is direct engagement with children and their families through the kind of clinicians, but there is also work undertaken in schools at a more kind of preventative and early intervention level to assist children's wellbeing. So that's the range of work that's going on there.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just item 6. I don't know if you want to add anything, Rachel, to what's already written there. Item 6, which is performance monitoring report.
So that I would ask Carl to speak to that. So as you can see, the data that we ordinarily bring to this group is now back in the pack. We weren't able to provide it to you last time because of the inspection, but here it is now.
This is what you want to do. Okay, thank you, Carl, please.
Thank you. If you give me one second while I just want to share the screen for the dashboard. Here we go. So it is probably a bit difficult to see. I mean, you will have had this in your packs. I think the reason for sharing it is still to just remind colleagues and share this as this is the performance dashboard that the Scrutiny Committee has requested, and you receive it in this format at every meeting. I also provided an update report as a cover report to go alongside this, and in the cover report you will see a summary of 4 indicators that are currently showing as amber and red. The majority of the explanation as to why some of the performance is showing as amber or red is in the departmental updates. However, on indicator 16, in terms of the relation to care proceedings, there's some service commentary in the cover report to explain why there is a delay in the courts, and unsurprisingly it is heavily related to COVID, and there's also reference to the fact that actually the duration of court proceedings is an issue that is outside of the of any sort of control of the local authority. We're very much in the court services hands there. The other thing I wanted to highlight in relation to the cover report was that there is one indicator where we are still struggling slightly with the data quality coming out of our care case management system. For members of this committee who have been here for a while, you will know that over the last year, this is a list that I have provided, and it has now significantly come down. I think if members went back to updates maybe 9 months ago or 12 months ago, you would have seen a list that probably included, you know, up to about half a dozen or even more indicators where I was struggling as a head of performance to provide you with accurate information. And what lies behind that is some real hard work that we've put in as a service to really stabilize some of our performance reporting. So whilst there is still an indicator, this is indicator 8 in terms of the accuracy of child protection conferences, where we are still working on the data quality, I would highlight the fact that actually this is a much improved picture. The last thing I would like to say is to offer my apologies that I wasn't able to provide a full performance dashboard at the last meeting, but as I mentioned earlier, I think there was an unhappy collision of the Scrutiny Committee and the Ofsted inspection at the same time, and that meant that my team was too stretched on that one occasion to provide the performance update. But you have it in front of you now, and I'm happy to take any questions and hopefully together with Rachel answer any queries, or indeed come back with a written response.
Anyone wants to ask any question? Yeah, okay. Councillor Kajina. Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Carl, for your report, what you've done. You know, normally I don't like sort of the red colours and all that, but I would like to say that this time I do forgive you due to COVID. So you're off the hook this time. So please keep up the good work and let's hope things get better.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? No. Oh yes, Councillor Henry, please.
Sorry. Please help me to, thank you, Carl. Please help me to understand this. Are you saying that the child protection has increased? Because having looked at 4 and 5, September it was 28.1, and then we have 1. Is it 13? I can't read it properly. Is it 13 or 33? 133.
Yeah. Okay. So this is relating to indicator 4, 4, and 5. The first, so indicator 4 is a rate per 10,000. So this is calculated as 10 per 10,000 of the population, which means that you can compare that number to other authorities, for instance. Or indeed over time. The indicator 5 is the absolute number, but obviously, for instance, a borough the size of Merton, if you wanted to compare yourself to other outer London boroughs, for instance, or statistical neighbours, you would use the rate per 10,000. In terms of your question, though, yes, it has increased. In April 20, the number of at the end of that month, it's a snapshot data, so it's always at the last day of the month, how many children are on a child protection plan. There were 89, and that has increased to 133 during the which coincides with the COVID lockdown, and you can see a subsequent increase in the rate as well, which was from 18.8 in April 20 to 28.1 in September 20. You will also see columns which compare that figure to England and London, and I think it's significant to look at that. A figure of 28.1 per 10,000 is significantly lower than the rate across England, which is 43.7, and also lower than the London rate, which is 36.7. So that's by way of explanation of the figures. So hopefully that enables you to kind of maybe understand what is on that performance report.
Thank you.
May I add some additional commentary to that, please?
Yes, okay, go ahead, Rachel.
So I would just want to say that the figure of 89 in April 2020 is staggeringly low and is out of kilter for our usual child protection numbers, which would be closer to the 113 that you saw in June 20. And there were particular reasons for that in April 2020 because of the way that we responded to the initial COVID lockdown. So about 110 to 120 would be a more typical number. The number that you see in September 2020 is therefore higher than usual for us, and that's part of what's causing the pressure in the service. And if I tell you that although we didn't have the data in time for the dispatch of these reports, obviously, because we're just in the first week of November, I know that the figure at the end of October was 149. So you'll see that that's a further increase. And that is why the service is really feeling caseload pressure, because those numbers are extraordinarily different from where they were at the start of this year.
Thank you. Okay. I think I just need to ask one little question, so just going backwards to page 10 of the report you just read, 2.32. I'm really pleased to see that something is being done about Black Lives Matters, but there are lots of training and everything, but I don't see the parents and I don't see the carers. And if we don't involve them, how are we going to progress?
Is this Chair?
It's where it says it's a scrutiny request, Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
And at the top of page 11, there's a list of what you plan to do so that staff will have governors training, workshop, teachers, lots of people. And all of that, I think, is positive. But I really don't think children come without carers or parents. And so they should be involved somewhere, and that's not mentioned.
So I'll respond to that, Carla.
Thank you.
So this is the work that the Education Division does in schools.
Yeah.
So the Education Division would not be directly providing to parents. What we're doing is we're supporting schools with their own programs. I don't have information about whether the school programs do or don't engage parents, but typically for these kind of programs, which are linked to the personal, social, health and emotional curriculum, and kind of connected to kind of civic well-being. Parents do get engaged with the work, but it's a matter for schools to determine how they offer their programs and how they engage children and families. Separately, there is a question about how the council engages with communities as a whole around racism and discrimination, and I would suggest that that's a matter for the Joint Consultative Committee, and there is work that's being undertaken there as well. And I suppose that kind of tackles the other end of these issues, which is from family and community, where sometimes those discriminatory values sadly are still embedded.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think this is probably the end now of all of what you need to do. And I'd like to say thank you very much on behalf of everyone for really explicit and careful thinking in your work. Ailey, I haven't forgotten to you. I'll deal with that at the minute afterwards. So I would like to add something that I have written, and this is to Rachel. As most of us probably know, Rachel has been with us for far too short a time to be leaving. However, that's life. We do have to move on sometimes. So I've written a little bit. I haven't known you very long, but the time that I've known you, I think I've learned quite a bit in every way, because we started off with the JCC meeting, which was very fraught, and you kept on really well. So I've written, this meeting is the last CYP to which we will have the privilege of having the knowledge and expertise of Rachel. She has been wonderful, really, in providing all of what well, most of what we need, and then very patient in listening to us and dealing with what comes next. This is only my second time. I would therefore like to thank you for all your professional and dedicated work. And as a director of Children, Schools and Family, whilst here in Merton, you're leaving us in a good position. And for us to continue to grow, thus just ensuring that the children and young people and family will go on from strength to strength while making Merton a good place to grow, be educated, and for families to thrive. We will miss you, but enjoy your journey. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser, thank you so much. That's very kind. I have a little thank you of my own, because it does feel to me as though I haven't spent enough time with you, but the time that I have spent I've found thoroughly enjoyable. I've really appreciated Merton as a place and as a community to serve, and I'm delighted that I'm leaving it in a good place and a good foundation for Merton to continue to grow. I want to say a special thank you to Scrutiny. So I've endured or enjoyed Scrutiny in a number of different places now, and I have to say that I think the way that Merton undertakes its scrutiny, or its children and young people scrutiny certainly, is a really good model. I have been properly challenged by members of this panel. I think you'd all agree, but I've also felt very well supported, and I have above all else felt that at all times your challenge to me has been about meeting the needs of Merton's children, supporting Merton's families, and having the best service provision for them. And so in that sense we are all on the same page, whatever angle we're coming from, because what we want is the best for our children and families, and that's the spirit in which you have scrutinised the work of my department, and I would thank you warmly for that. It's been eye-opening for me. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we should all applaud.
Yeah, applaud yourselves.
Thank you.
Right. So Carl and Rachel, you don't have to stay for the last bit because you're not really going to be involved in that at the moment. Thank you, and have a good rest, whatever you do.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you, and have a lovely evening. Thank you, and bye now.
Right, and now I've got to say to oh gosh, my mind is gone now. The question you asked, Haley, the answer will come from Joan, because I didn't actually watch what she was telling me. I do know about the group, and I think probably the best thing for Joan to do, and I'll speak to her, is to send it to Stella, so then it can be shared.
Okay, that's great. Just for clarity to everybody, I didn't see that, obviously I've met Unique Talents on a few occasions. I didn't see that they were on television on Monday. I thought they were a brilliant group of individuals, and I'd really like to know what programme they're on, and so that I can actually watch it. Glad I didn't see that.
I'll make sure that gets to you. Thank you.
Okay.
So last but not least is the work programme. So we're well in time to finish, to have a look at it and finish to see where we're at. We're not in January yet, no. Right, so we've covered November the 4th, so the next one will be in January. Again, COVID will be there, but it won't be Rachel, because she won't be there. We need to, I haven't got the name of the person who's taking over, but I'm sure I'll find out from Haley, or I'll look it up anyway myself. And Caroline obviously will come back to us with round 2 of the budget. And again, whoever is taken over from Rachel will deal with all the other issues to do with the department. And so I think that's where we've come to an end, unless anyone has a question. Go on, Haley. Go.
Okay. Obviously, it's been a really difficult year because of what the whole country is going through. I do not want to go away from some of the areas that we were expecting papers from throughout this year, though, where we were talking about a full review of EHCP. So I know that's in Rachel's departmental report, but I think we were all going to be looking for something a bit more substantial end to end in terms of what the plan was for EHCPs. Similarly with SEN transport, foster care provision, particularly moving away from agency foster care, and also I think that we were expecting some sort of review on care leaver apprenticeship scheme as well from my past notes. I know, I'm not sure whether or not they will be, or we can actually squeeze them in as agenda items, but I do think we do need to be looking for what we'd actually set to get out of 2020-21. If we can't put them on the agenda, then we do actually need to have a look in terms of having some sort of update on those areas.
Well, I'm sure Eleanor is listening to all of that. So I'll work with her as much as possible. And the next person who is taking over from Rachel and with Stella to make sure that what we'd like is on the agenda and how we're going to manage them.
Okay.
And of course, you can write to me whenever you want to or call me. Thank you all very much indeed. And I'm sorry for those who came in while I was struggling with my computer. It drives me mad sometimes. It works when it feels like it. It doesn't work other times. But it was there. And Councillor Holmes, although we couldn't see you, we could hear you well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
And it's lovely always to have you there anyway, because
you referenced me as a test to make sure I was still here, did you?
You could say that. So thank you all very much and take care until we meet again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.